Welcome back, everyone, to Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone out here.
Hey, thanks for tuning in again, guys. And yes, Merry Christmas. We're recording this on Christmas.
And we are super excited this week to be covering two entries into the MCU that are sort of holiday themed, one more than the other. We are going to first finish up the closing trio of episodes of Hawkeye, which just wrapped a couple of nights ago. So we're excited to talk about that, and then really excited to get into Spider-Man No Way Home. So we'll kick it off with Hawkeye. And Cam, let me have your initial impressions of the closing trio of episodes.
Yeah, I thought the last three episodes were overall stronger than the first three, and a little bit more entertaining, and they moved a lot quicker. However, I did have a lot of issues with the execution, and as much as I loved kind of the broad strokes that the story was moving towards, I have a lot of issues with how a lot of the particular stuff was handled.
Okay.
In particular, the villains of the show, but I will get more into that once we delve deeper into our kind of spoiler-filled thoughts. But I would say overall, I liked it, like I have liked every single MCU entry, but I think this is probably the weakest of the shows for me.
Overall, I loved the closing trio of episodes. I thought it wrapped up on a really great note. It really wrapped all of the story points together. That's one of the things I liked about this, is every sort of story point that was raised kind of came to a conclusion. There was plenty of surprises that we'll get into in a little bit. And yeah, overall, I found it the most satisfying and sort of consistent from end to end of the Marvel shows so far. So definitely we have a little bit of a difference of opinion on that. But yeah, overall, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it was the most consistent out of all the shows, and I think we've discussed how Hawkeye was probably the least affected by COVID and filming schedules and all that sort of thing.
Yep.
But I guess on that kind of note, I feel like they don't have as much of an excuse as the other shows did when it comes to some of the weaker points of the writing. So, like I said, I loved the broad strokes. I mean, I loved the introduction of Kate Bishop, and I think she's a great character. And I loved how her and Hawkeye's relationship kind of evolved, especially over the last three episodes. I also loved how it was kind of a memorial for Natasha, and we got to see a lot of Natasha's backstory and how Clint is dealing with her death. So overall, and then just the kind of broad arc of the story, I thought it was good overall. But the biggest issue that I had with it, I think, is villains, and there being too many, and none of them were particularly menacing or effective as villains, with the exception of Kingpin, who I'll get to in a moment. But we start out with the Tracksuit Mafia, and then their kind of leader, Echo, and her second-in-command, Kazi, I think his name was. And they were all great and really funny, but we never really got to see exactly what they do. Like, we don't know exactly what crimes they're committing, other than shooting at Clint and Hawkeye I guess we saw them raid the auction at the beginning, but in terms of in the grand scheme of terrible things that have been done in the MCU, that didn't seem like the biggest thing. And we don't really know what their end goal with raiding that was. And then on top of that, you have Echo and Kazi, and all of them, the Tracksuit Mafia in general, were kind of played to be comedic. And also they were humanized, especially even that one kind of random mobster guy that talks about wanting to go see Imagine Dragons or whatever with Haley. And I felt like they did such a great job humanizing all of these kind of villains that I didn't want them to fight. I didn't know who to root for. And then at the end, when they were just like mass slaughtering all the Tracksuit Mafia, I almost was like, wow, this is too brutal, because they spent so much building these kind of goofy characters that aren't really that bad and humanizing them, especially Echo and Kazi, that at the end I was like, I don't want any of these guys to be fighting. They should talk it out, because they don't seem to be doing all that bad stuff, you know? And so kind of building off of that, the reveal of Kingpin I thought was great, and he was kind of the big bad at the end of the show, but because they kept him as a reveal, he didn't get any real development, and so he kind of came out of nowhere. And we have a connection to him through Daredevil, but if you hadn't seen Daredevil, he's just kind of this guy. And then at the end, I based on what happens in the comics, I know he's probably not dead, but it seems like they brought him back and made a big deal, only for him to not do much and then get kind of dispatched quickly at the end. Now, I mean, I did love how they upped his power levels and he was able to take so many hits and everything, and I think they did a great job portraying Kingpin, but I just think it's kind of indicative of this villain problem where there didn't seem to be a real solid villain that I could root against, and I was kind of rooting for everybody, and then obviously Yelena came in at the end, and that's another kind of almost villain, but we like her and we know she's good, so it was kind of like I didn't really know how to feel, and it ended up being just kind of tonally strange for me. And so that's why I was really hoping that the last episode would kind of solidify everything and I would end up liking it. But because it ended on that kind of odd note, it ended up being a little bit disappointing for me.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, no, I had a totally different take. Obviously, I love this one just because it's, again, very grounded, street level, no sci-fi stuff really. And I really thought it just carried on that sort of holiday action movie vibe, the whole Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, and then I even want to say Home Alone 2. I almost compare the Tracksuit Mafia to the villains in Home Alone. I think they were played soft. I think they were, so I guess I just didn't get as hung up on their motivations. I'm like, they're bad guys and they work for this really bad guy who we're going to figure out who he is at some point. And that was good enough for me. I guess it's all, I think what you're looking for from the story. But I mean, I don't disagree with you. It definitely, there was obviously the Tracksuit Mafia. They're just goofy minions, if you will. Then there was Echo and Kazi, and I think they were humanized. And I think their story, in the way it wrapped up, him being sort of the turncoat and her sort of really not wanting to do what she was doing. I thought so again, in the sense that wrapped up, I thought that was great. One of the things that I loved about the show was, and you mentioned already, this show is definitely, I think, very much intended to be a love letter to Natasha, and even more than Black Widow, because Black Widow really dealt with her backstory, like, from childhood, and then there was a little bit of that sort of, oh, she's gone now, only really through the post-credit scene, which then Julia Louis-Dreyfus came in and sort of, kind of took the wind out of the emotional part of that post-credit scene. So this movie really, I felt, because how much I was not happy about her getting killed off in Endgame, and not even so much that she got killed off, but then for the rest of Endgame through the whole finale, it's like they mentioned her like twice, and it was like, wow, this huge character is gone and she sacrificed herself, and they're just like, yep, Tony. I got closure on Natasha Romanoff through this show, I think more so than anything that's come before that, so I thought that was really great about it. I love the development of Kate and Clint's relationship, Jeremy Renner and Haley Steinfeld. There were a few, there were a few kind of on the nose moments between the two of them as they sort of like, finally kind of reconciled that they were going to be partners and they were doing whatever they were doing, and her sort of getting to where she got in terms of deciding to go, full hero, if you will. But I thought that the final couple of episodes really solidified and made her choice to become a hero and allowed us to believe in it because of sort of what happened with her mom turning out to be so involved with the mafia and with Kingpin and having done all these terrible things, and her getting arrested at the end, that it really sort of solidified her ability to, stop being a 24-year-old college student or whatever she was and become this person who was going to be a full-time, potentially Avenger. I loved Yelena. I loved the way they brought her in, and you knew they were going to play I love the way that they set up her disdain for Clint coming from the fact that she just got blipped and comes back and oh yeah, your sister's dead, she saved the world and whatever. And so she was just on sort of a rampage to kind of process that grief and wasn't able to accept that. So I thought that was really good. I loved bringing back Wilson Fisk. I think it says a lot about the Netflix show Daredevil among all of the other Marvel live action shows that have been done on various platforms. Obviously, Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige definitely have a lot of respect for that show because they brought back this character and it was played pretty much the same way it was played in Daredevil. And we're going to speak about No Way Home in a few minutes, and definitely the whole Daredevil Netflix show pops up in that as well. But I think really for me it was just about how every plot point got kind of wrapped up in a satisfying way. There was no nagging questions that I had in Loki and WandaVision in particular, but well, what happened? What about this? And what about, remember that? I just felt like there were a lot of questions that sort of didn't get answered or left really open-ended in those shows. Not that there can't be, questions left for future seasons. And I think it seems to be that this is just a one-shot. And it almost played to me like a movie. This one, I could totally see this story having been condensed and being, a 2 hour and 5 minute movie. They could have told a similar story, albeit much more condensed. And so that's what felt to me, the most, what made it feel sort of really consistent. So what are your additional thoughts? Any other points?
Oh, I mean, I agree with most of your conclusions. I just think that the kind of weird villain issue that I was having overshadowed most of the positives for me. But I did like it. I liked how it wrapped up with the end. Obviously, Clint and Kate going. I actually wasn't expecting Kate's mom to be the kind of catalyst and kind of reason the whole thing kind of got started in the first place. Although I will say I was almost like, wow, they're really going out of their way to make Jack Duquesne like really, really nice and goofy. It almost feels too much of a 180 for him to be the bad guy, and then obviously he didn't end up having anything to do with it. So I thought that was kind of a fun twist, and I enjoyed his character and him at the end just kind of going crazy with the sword. I thought was really fun.
Yeah, that was funny. And the LARPing people came back, so that sort of gave some support to the whole LARPing subplot. I thought that was funny. And this is Vera Farmiga, who played Elizabeth Bishop, Kate's mom. It was funny. This is like the second time she's played the caring but misguided mom. She played sort of the same exact character in Godzilla King of the Monsters with Millie Bobby Brown a few years ago. So I was like, I wonder if that's like a running theme with her to play the misguided mom. I thought that was really interesting. I think this one for me, I think it just I just felt it has the biggest rewatch value. I think partially because it's short, and again, it just has that holiday theme, so I can see myself wanting to come back and watch this again. One question I have, which I wonder what your thoughts are on it, I still don't get the significance of the watch. They finally found the watch at the end. He gave it back to, Clint gave it back to his wife. It had the SHIELD logo on it. So is that, and he meant something like, I think he said something to her like, keep track of your stuff better. So does that indicate that Laura used to be a SHIELD operative?
Yeah, that's what people online were saying. Okay. And I guess, I was reading a little bit about what that meant at the end because I was confused too. I guess in the comics, he marries Bobby Morse, Mockingbird, for a little while, who's Agent 19. And then on the back of Laura's watch was Agent 19. So I guess it's kind of tying that into the comics a little bit. I'm not sure if that means she's Mockingbird or how that ties into Mockingbird from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And if that decanonizes her or what. But I guess that's what they were going for with that. That seemed like kind of a strange kind of tag to put at the end of it. I didn't really see the point of that other than kind of giving Linda Cardellini a little bit of a superhero nod for her kind of supporting role. She's a great actress, but she didn't really have much to do in these movies. So
the only thing I think it does is maybe sort of justify the fact that she can just sort of take her husband, running around doing all this stuff, and she just talks to him talks him through all of his plans, and instead of acting like a typical spouse whose spouse is doing all these crazy spy things and probably freaking out, she's always been so grounded about it and so supportive and everything else. And I think the fact that she might have had a similar past maybe kind of makes that a little bit more believable. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
Do you want to close? Do you have any other thoughts?
No, I think I covered pretty much all my major thoughts.
All right, so I thought we closed this off with just a little bit, with just a ranking of the live-action Marvel shows so far. Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. I would say at the top is probably Loki. It might be a toss-up between WandaVision and Loki because I thought they were both good, but I would say Loki is number 1, WandaVision number 2. Falcon Winter Soldier 3, and then Hawkeye, unfortunately, at the bottom.
Wow. So we are very similar, but yet very different. I think this is my favorite one so far, so I'd put Hawkeye. Yeah, like I said, I just think, to me, this is the one that I just watched the whole way through. Despite, outside of the sort of little, up and down moments in the first 2 episodes, this one really just sort of was on a crescendo for me, and I just thought got better and better and better. And, it is light and just, holiday themed and all that. It was, to me, this one, for me, just felt like it came out exactly the way they conceived it, like, whereas, in some of the other shows, you can tell really where things sort of like took a turn that probably wasn't what they originally intended to do. So Hawkeye number 1. I'm sort of the same as you. I put WandaVision second, but I really feel like WandaVision and Loki are kind of tied. I think, maybe if I rewatch them, I might put Loki ahead of WandaVision, but those two are the middle. And then Falcon and the Winter Soldier at the end. I love that one. I thought it started out great, but I just felt like the finale really seemed just to me to be kind of totally discombobulated, and I wasn't sure where they knew where they were going with the finale. I mean, like I said, I didn't not enjoy it, but that one sort of took me for a loop. Maybe in a similar way, but for different reasons that the Hawkeye finale didn't sort of do it for you. All right, so that's a wrap on the Hawkeye series. We didn't get a teaser for one of the next series coming. I thought it was fine and funny that they played for laughs in the mid-credit scene that full-on Rogers the musical number there, but I think everybody would have preferred more of a teaser for something that was coming instead.
Right, yeah. I thought there was going to be a trailer or something for Echo.
Right. Oh, is that going to be a show?
Yeah, that's the next. I think because that's what they were setting up at the end with Fisk and her. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Yeah, I liked her character, and that's probably another reason too why they probably made her not totally villainous or whatever.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely.
But okay, so that's a wrap on Hawkeye. Next up is Spider-Man No Way Home. This, I feel like, is the first true post-COVID blockbuster and has the box office receipts to prove it. This one did really, really well. We were pretty blown away by Spider-Man No Way Home. We got to see it twice before recording this episode. So Cam, let me know what your initial thoughts are.
Yeah, like you said, we were blown away by it. I think I can say pretty confidently it's probably my favorite Spider-Man movie, and in my opinion the best. And this isn't getting into spoilers, but we know that the villains have come back from the previous Spider-Man movie, and without going too far into the details of the movie, I think the immediate comparison everyone is going to make is the 2017 animated Spider-Verse movie, which was very good, and I think a lot of people rank that really high in terms of Spider-Man movies just because it's such a unique idea paired with the incredible kind of unique animation breakthrough that they did. And I think a lot of people might have a problem with me saying I think this did the kind of Spider-Verse better, but the reason I say that is just because we have more of an attachment to these characters, right? Seeing them come back. And so I think in that way it was more effective because it was almost like a reunion of these characters that we've kind of been with for so many years. So I think it worked a lot better. And I don't think I can really go into much more without spoiling, so I'll just pass it over to you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, for me, I think the animated films, I just don't. I really enjoyed Into the Spider-Verse too, but I can't rate animated films the same way I would rate a live action film. But yeah, this was awesome. I look at this from the lens of like the MCU through COVID, like 2020 and 2021. You know, Spider-Man No Way Home was the end of phase 3. And it finished it off, and then we've really had nothing except the dribs and drabs we've gotten through COVID, and then starting in 2021. And so, like, for me, like, I loved Black Widow, I loved the Hawkeye show, and then sort of everything else is the next tier down for me, like Shang-Chi, Eternals, and the rest of the Marvel shows. Those fall into the really enjoyed them category. But then along comes this movie, and I think it really just knocked it out of the park, and it's definitely one of those landmark MCU films like the first Avenger, like Cap Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, it's up there with those, and I think easily it'd be impossible not to call this the best of the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, just because it's just so huge.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Hard to know where to begin. You know, it definitely picks up right where the last film left off, and there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. So let me just pause to give we're going to get into deeper thoughts now, which includes spoilers. And yeah, let's just jump right into it, Cam.
I want to talk a little bit about the hype surrounding this movie. It's kind of funny because how the last one ended, I wasn't really thinking this was going to be anything super special, just because it seemed like it was going in a totally different direction. But slowly, as things kind of started to trickle out about this movie and where the direction they were going with it's kind of like a sleeper hype movie, because whereas with Avengers, it's like it's an Avengers movie, everybody knows it's going to be huge.
Right.
But with this one, we weren't sure exactly what direction they were going to be going with it. So it could have just ended up being a fairly average Tom Holland Spider-Man movie with, I don't know, some new villain or a new version of a villain that we've seen before. But I guess from what I understand, Sony saw the success of the Spider-Verse movie and kind of forced them to do a live-action Spider-Verse, which somehow, I guess a broken clock is right once or twice a day, and somehow that ended up being Sony's stupid idea ended up being the best idea, and they were able to really make something incredible out of it, which meant bringing back Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man and Spider-Man, and that's obviously where the movie really shines. But up until that point, the kind of emotional story of Peter trying to clear his name and deal with all of the downsides that come with not having a secret identity and also trying to get into college, I thought that was all a great emotional core to the story.
Right.
And then they really didn't bring Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire back until the last third, which I thought was interesting because they could have easily brought them in much earlier and had them throughout the whole movie. But I thought the last kind of third of the movie that they were in was spectacular. They had incredible kind of banter back and forth. And like you were saying, once we left the movie, they kind of did everything you were expecting them to with this movie. The villains came back, the Spider-Man came back, and then they even kind of interacted in the exact way that you would want them to. So they reacted to Tobey Maguire having organic webs coming out of his hands. That was so funny, yeah. Which was hilarious. And then they were able to kind of put a nice end point on Andrew Garfield's story when he saves MJ from falling, which is kind of his redemption. And so they really just kind of looked at what everybody wanted, and instead of doing the opposite of that, they just leaned into it. And as a result, it was a great movie, and I do have to say, I think there are a lot of kind of plot conveniences.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple of those too.
Yeah, like things work out a little bit too nicely, I think, just to make everything kind of happen the way it does. But unlike a movie like The Last Jedi, which is one of the most contrived plots of all time, and also doesn't give you any payoff or exciting moments, this movie knows that it's a little bit contrived, and so it goes out of its way to give plenty of fan service and great scenes, and as a result, it's better for that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like hard to know where to begin. Like this, obviously, it picks up right from where Far From Home left off. Mysterio sabotages Spider-Man, reveals his identity, and then everything goes to crap. And yeah, you've covered that. How it had a great that great basis of like, oh my god, how am I going to deal with this? And I thought it was really incredible how they brought in all of those previous franchise villains from the Andrew Garfield movies and the Tobey Maguire movies. Everyone got their moments to shine, across all those actors, RZA fans, Thomas Hayden Church, who am I leaving out?
Jamie Foxx,
and then
Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, obviously Goblin and Doc Ock getting center stage, but still, everyone got a chance to shine and have poignant moments. And I was totally surprised when, maybe not totally surprised, but they really had me believing, and I think this is a testament to why they work so hard at keeping these secrets. And the fact that Tobey Maguire basically sort of stayed off the radar, but obviously Andrew Garfield, there's a lot of videos and interviews out there where he's just denying that he's in the film, which was hilarious. But to me, I was like, because we got 2/3 of the way through the movie and didn't know they were coming, and then all of a sudden here they are. I just thought that was really great. And they had, like I said, they had me believing that they weren't going to be in it, and then it was like, oh wow, they really are going to be in it. So I thought that was great. And you're right, like everything that people thought might happen in this movie happened in this movie. And that brings us to the Charlie Cox's Daredevil from the Netflix Daredevil show showing up in this film. And I mentioned that when we talked about Hawkeye, how Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, shows up in the finale of Hawkeye. And so it just goes to show Kevin Feige, the Marvel Studios, definitely has some fondness for that particular Netflix show. And I would just give it a shout out. If you haven't watched any of the Netflix Marvel shows, definitely at least watch Daredevil. It was just really, really well done. But I wasn't expecting that, and then boom, there it was. So I think it really, but I think I guess my point was, it's a really testament to Marvel trying that hard to not reveal those things. Because if we had known that Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were going to be in these films, I think I could see myself having gotten impatient during the movie for when are they going to show up? I mean, now would be a great time for them to show up, and maybe not really sort of appreciating what was going on in the movie just because you're waiting for that appearance. And so I think the fact that they just denied it so hard, that made it work, that they didn't show up until really the sort of final act, kind of an extended final act. So again, I thought that was really, really good the way that came out. Getting into just some of the things that, if I had a problem with anything in this movie, it was what you probably referred to as plot conveniences. I don't know if they're these specific ones, but first thing is, it was a little bit of a stretch of that sort of suspension of disbelief for me, that while they gave a justification for it, Doctor Strange doing this spell for Peter to try to make everybody forget, just him doing that spell for the reason that he was doing it, that had such a potential to have such catastrophic implications if it went wrong, and of course it did go wrong, that was like, that sort of stretched believability. And then the other plot point for me, I thought, was when May kind of tells, when Peter does his whole, like, I want to help these people and find cures for them. And then when he has that sort of confrontation with May about, whether he should just send them back to their fates that have already been set in stone. I mean, really, from a kind of objective viewpoint, Peter was right. He should. These people, they lived and they died however they died in these other universes, and we don't owe them anything. Like, that really is, from an objective standpoint, the kind of the quote unquote right thing to do. So the fact that they put all of this sort of emotional weight behind, no, we're going to help them, and then just the whole idea of the three Peters cooking up cures for each one of these villains in 2 hours in a high school lab, was kind of, even though they had an assist from Stark Tech, that was, so there were moments that stretched believability. There were moments that were sort of in there to make the plot hang together. But everything, like you said, the emotional core that it started out on, and then just everything being so great with all of the bringing back the characters and implications from the other movie series was just so great, and the way they wrapped it up was really bittersweet. And I have a few other ideas that I wanted to cover in our sort of additional thoughts, but that's my kind of deeper take on the movie. What are your additional thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. Those were kind of the two big plot conveniences or contrivances or holes or whatever you want to call them that I had in mind. Is one, it's like all of it could have just ended immediately if they just pressed the button on the box. And
Yeah.
but I will say that kind of, it's a great character building moment for this Peter Parker, because that is obviously going to play into his characterization later on as we go deeper into the phase 4 and onward. So it definitely served a purpose in terms of his character, but like from a logical standpoint, that like it all could have been avoided. And then there's just some smaller conveniences, like Ned very quickly opening 2 portals to the exact 2 Peter Parkers that they needed to find, which was it was a great reveal how they did it. I loved all that, so it's not a huge issue, just another example. And then towards the end, when Doctor Strange wipes people's memories about Peter Parker, there's a lot of confusion as to how exactly that works and the logistics of that. And
no, that's a great one, because we were talking after we left the movie. I was definitely like, okay, I buy it. The whole he made everybody forget, but it's definitely, if you think too hard about it, you run into a lot of problems. Final thoughts for me, just a couple things. This really is kind of a landmark pop culture thing. I was trying to think of other film franchises that had done something like this, with bringing together, these. I mean, I think across, movie studios is probably had with different actors for different character for the same character. Nothing like this, I think, has ever been really done before. I thought of like the movie Star Trek Generations that brought, Captain Picard together with Captain Kirk through that sort of dimensional time rift, and Spock showing up in episodes of The Next Generation, and then obviously the Abrams reboot. But that's the closest thing I can think of. I mean, you could say the Star Wars sequels, bringing back Princess Leia and Han Solo, but that's really more of like these characters knew about each other, they existed in the same universe, they were just separated by time. I can't think of anything else like this that's been done. Can you?
No, definitely not. I think this is the first time we've had 3 versions of the same character in a single movie, as far as I can think of.
Yeah, right. It would almost be like having maybe the Doctor Who's. Remember that? They did a
crossover. Yeah, I remember that.
But still, that's not quite what this is. Post-credit scenes or mid-credit and post-credit scenes, I would say, if I could give any advice to people out there, I would say that they're not essential. The mid-credit scene is not essential unless you're a huge fan of the Sony Venom films. And then the post-credit scene is actually just a trailer for the next Doctor Strange movie, which you can see online. So if you don't want to sit around at the end of the movie, you can definitely find them online. Or the only other question I had was a really great bittersweet ending. And it seems like we're saying goodbye, obviously, to May, and probably to Happy, since he doesn't know who Peter is anymore, and it seems like to MJ and Ned we're saying goodbye to as well. Do you think that that's permanent? That's my first question.
I would say probably. I mean, if they were going to keep Zendaya and Jacob Batalon is Ned's name, they're both kind of up and coming actors, especially Zendaya. She's huge right now. So I was a little bit surprised that they were kind of tying her story up, but I think they would have made it a little bit more obvious that she was coming back if they intended that. And I think with how the movie ends, it kind of sets up a more authentic Spider-Man story to be told in the next one, whereas these past 3 Spider-Man movies have been very tied into Tony Stark and the MCU. And I think some people who like more traditional, kind of low-tech, not low stakes, but like more street level kind of stuff, I think we'll be getting more of that. So I think they're kind of ushering in a new era, and with that might come a new girlfriend and best friend for Peter. So I could see them doing Gwen Stacy, but probably more likely is Felicia Hardy, who's the Black Cat, who has some romantic stuff with Peter in the comics, and we haven't seen her in the movies yet, so I'm guessing that's where they're going to go in that direction. So yeah, I think it is permanent, but we'll see obviously more Tom Holland in the distant future.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. You set up my next question. So it seems to me, you made a great point about like doing more sort of Spider-Man centric films going forward, not so tied into the larger MCU narrative. I was wondering, does this set up Tom Holland Spider-Man to appear in a Sony-led Spider-Man movie or even series of movies that are more sort of in line with their weird sort of Spider-Verse thing that they're doing with Venom and Morbius, and not connected really at all to the MCU narrative?
Right, I think it's possible. I didn't really get that sense from the end. To me, it seemed, if anything, that they were saying, oh, we're going to continue having Spider-Man in the MCU. I guess it will depend on if Morbius and Venom... I guess Venom is officially not in the MCU. I'm not sure about Morbius, because I know Michael Keaton shows up, and that's supposed to be kind of a tie-in, but ultimately, I think Kevin Feige has the last say on that. So unless he comes out and says Morbius is in the MCU, then I would expect them to tie that in more so. But until then, I still think it's going to be pretty separate. If anything, the kind of resurgence in appreciation for Andrew Garfield has had lots of rumors swirling around whether they're going to try to continue his movie universe, which I think I'm kind of skeptical that they will, especially because it's kind of funny. I guess just one last aside about Andrew Garfield. You were talking about how he was kind of consistently denying he was in the movie. I almost was skeptical he was in the movie at all, because in one interview I remember him saying something like, oh, well, it was great to be a part of the Spider-Man movies, but, that's very corporate and you don't get a lot of freedom to kind of do what you want, and I want to branch out. And so he was kind of trashing on the kind of corporate nature of the Spider-Man films. So I wonder if maybe he did this as kind of a favor to them, and now he's kind of hoping to leave Spider-Man officially behind him. So I'm a little bit skeptical, but I mean, who knows? Maybe he had such a fun time on the set that he wants to do it again, that sort of thing. But I think Tom Holland is going to remain separate for the time being, and I kind of hope he does, because I don't think Morbius looks very good.
Right. No, I agree. Yeah, so, and I think it would be really hard to have two active Spider-Mans played by two different actors. That'd be kind of difficult. But what's interesting, my final thought, is just how this No Way Home is almost, it's setting up that sort of trilogy of WandaVision, the TV show, leading into No Way Home with Doctor Strange's involvement and the multiverse involvement, and then obviously now the next thing, the clock is ticking now, we're officially waiting again for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So there's almost like a little trilogy thing going on with those three entries in the MCU, with a little bit of an assist from Loki with the whole multiverse thing. But it's kind of interesting how all these projects are tying in together. But now, unfortunately, we thought we were only going to have to wait till March, but looks like we're going to have to wait till May for the next film installment of the MCU. All right. Well, that is a wrap on No Way Home. Definitely go see it. Definitely see it in the theater if you can. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays to everyone out there celebrating their various holidays. And we will talk to you soon with our next episode.
Thanks for listening, guys. Happy holidays.